Hi, okay, welcome back to Cubs and Culture. This will be the concluding segment. Okay, let me reorientate what I was discussing. I was discussing how the left, or segments of the secular left, are not only like hostile to expressions of religious faith, but they're pointlessly hostile towards certain religious things. So let me use a quick example. So the example I was working on is the whether or not Jesus of Nazareth actually existed. Now, here's the thing, and this is why it's such a pointless argument. Jesus of Nazareth, as an historical figure, given the time period we're talking about, which is the ancient world, he is no more and no less well established than multiple other figures in history, which we don't debate about. Or at least we don't feel the need to really debate about, other than unless you're an actual scholar in Near East studies. So, for example, Socrates, as an historical figure, we don't have his any sort of paperwork we should have if he was in fact existed and was tried. He never wrote anything down. The four writers we have who wrote about him, Plato and Aristotle being the main two, and then also two playwrights. They were all like Socrates as a figure. He's clearly he's written about as both an historical figure, but also there are times in which, especially in Plato, and like Meno, what's another? Oh, the later dialogues like the Republic. Phaedo, that's it. I think I'm saying it wrong. Anyway, the one where they talk about the forms in great detail on his deathbed when he's drinking the hemlock. It's quite clear that that's Socrates at that point isn't really the guy in history. He's a mouthpiece for Plato's own philosophical views. The only one of Plato's dialogues which is purported to be actual, like, a representation of what Socrates actually said is the Apology. And so this is an entire study in philosophy called the Socratic problem, which is trying to tease out the various ways in which the real Socrates, basically, from the textual evidence that we have. Another sort of example is Thales, who is the father of philosophy. He predicted an eclipse. He never wrote anything down. The things we have about him are from fragments of various philosophical texts. The amount of information we have about him, the fragments probably fills like 5 pages, if that. Or the one that's probably the strongest is Pythagoras. The guy of the theorem, though, he probably didn't actually do the theorem himself. It was probably a student of his. There's absolutely no reason, if you are going to be skeptical about Jesus of Nazareth existing, to be consistent, you have to be skeptical of Pythagoras. The amount of evidence we have for Pythagoras is less, but in any case, Jesus of Nazareth is at least as well established. Now, you might say, well, Pythagoras doesn't have like miracles attached to him, and he fucking did. He was claimed to have a golden thigh. He was supposed to be in 2 places at once. He was a religious guru type leader. So a lot of his sayings, like not to eat beans, etc., were a religious group. Iona, whatever. Or you might say, well, Jesus of Nazareth as an historical figure, we need to argue about this because he has a deep influence where Pythagoras doesn't. And that's also not fucking true. Because Pythagoras, unlike the transmigration of the soul, influenced Plato, and because of Plato, he influences the rest of the Western canon and a whole bunch of other civilization. Also, sort of like the notion that, like, the Pythagorean claim to fame is that numbers somehow represent or are reality. Like, just going to baseball because this is Cubs and Culture. Like, cybermetrics would not be a thing if Pythagoras and Pythagoreans didn't exist. The notion that mathematical relationships or mathematics are a way of grasping reality, that idea is at its core Pythagorean, and it's still to this fucking day deeply influential and in some ways ascendant, given how scientific and our society has become. So, like, the reason why I said so, like, just in terms of the argument, it's sort of a bullshit argument. But here's the thing: let's just say they're actually, and this is one of the reasons why in Near East studies it's not. Like, no one treats this argument really seriously. It's the fringe of a fringe idea. Well, the thing is, but set the actual strength of the argument aside. Here's the thing. When I've seen this brought up in atheist space, it's always like sub-argument 6 about religious influence or religion in general. So, like, here's the thing. If Jesus of Nazareth, the historical figure, let's just say he is a myth, he's just, no, there's not a rabbi or a preacher that inspired the Gospels because he got a following and was crucified, sort of like the main beats of the Christ narrative. Let's just say that never happened. It's entirely a fabrication. You're still going to end up arguing with people about whether or not God exists, and more importantly, what is the proper bounds of religious liberty, religious behavior that the state should be engaged in. It's not like you can't demonstrate that Jesus of Nazareth didn't exist. There's absolutely no way of doing that. And so, like, you can't, like, there's no reason to really argue about it, because at the end of the day, you're not, like, it doesn't even matter for the arguments that you actually need to have, which is, again, if you're talking about, like, societal things, it's the proper limits of religious beliefs in terms of the business of the state. So I actually have a quick example about this. So give me a moment. So, a lot of times when I've seen this argument, I've seen it actually on sort of the social justice, feminist, atheist community, which is fine. They're generally they're obviously very generally good. I like reading their stuff. I'm not sure if I consider myself a part of it, because, like, feminism is, like, I consider myself a feminist, though that's not my principal political ideology, and then atheist is really the sticking point. In any case, what tends to happen is a lot of times these arguments, what happens a lot is because of, I'm thinking of abortion, right? Abortion and I think correctly, abortion and abortion rights are a major area of concern for feminists in this country, because not only is under attack, but sort of women and people who can get pregnant having bodily autonomy is a big fucking deal. And it's also true that the principal pro-life movement is religiously motivated. And so, like, I feel like when this argument about whether or not Jesus of Nazareth comes up, it's completely irrelevant to what the two groups are actually disagreeing about, which is about abortion rights. But both sides can't leave well enough alone. And so, like, because the Christian right is so offensive and oppressive in this way towards women and people that can have children, that people on the secular left feel the need to argue about whether or not Jesus of Nazareth actually existed, when in fact they should just be screaming about, like, not denying women bodily autonomy. And so that's what I mean by it's this pointless hostility. And then it's also sort of like trying to catch people, religious believers, in hypocrisies. I already sort of talked about this with the Masterpiece cake thing. Religion is such a diverse and secular, diverse set of people that it's really hard to catch people in hypocrisy. And so, like, at the end of the day, I feel like the secular left is so allergic, because they, correctly, mind you, they hear so much about sort of the oppressive force that some religions and some religious groups bring to bear within the context of American politics, that they're missing a whole slew of way of talking about these things. And the thing is, I'm not the first person to observe this, but in terms of sort of politics in which the Republicans, GOP, actually follow. I know there's probably justifications, obviously because of the Christian right or whatever. There's probably a lot of justifications which, for a lot of people, feel absolutely correct in terms of Christianity. And I'm not trying to hit them with a hypocrisy thing. It's just, it's really easy to read the red letters, to read the words of Jesus of Nazareth, and come up with a lot of social justice. Social justice as a concept is initially from liberation theology and a whole slew of deeply religious people, and there's then Quakers and Unitarians, like this entire other form of religion, a way of talking about religion that motivates sort of leftist politics the centralist Democrats just ignore. Let me pause for a second. So you get things like blessed are the poor and the Beatitudes, or you have it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter heaven. And I know there's different interpretations of that, or the love of money is the greatest thing, or then even for sort of the distinctions between private and public in terms of state action. You have Christ saying, "Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's." So I think in a lot of ways the left, again, centralist, sort of wonky establishment Democrats, and then also sort of the extreme far left, deeply Marxist or materialistic in the philosophical sense, throw the baby out with the bathwater, and they're pointlessly hostile. And I think there's an entire meaning gap between the left and the right in this country, because the left is so adverse and pointlessly sometimes towards religious faith. And so this came up with Ben-Hur because I was imagining if it was released today, and I imagine if it won Best Picture or won 11 Oscars, that on PZ Meyer's blog, he would complain about it for a day and a half because it being a Christian movie. But despite anything about sort of the craftsmanship, etc. Okay, I am rambling at this point. I hope you enjoyed this one. This was a longer one. Have a good day. Cubs and Culture out.